Albania is yet to open the chapters of the negotiation process. And in November, we know that the latest assessment highlighted areas which need more work, the ones which we have prepared for, the ones which we're not so prepared for. But now I want to ask you, aside from those, do you see any big challenges in terms of diversity and inclusion, in terms of Albania's accession to the EU? For example, and I'm mentioning this because in Kosovo, Albin Kurti has said that this year they're going to allow same-sex unions, which is great. They've said this is part of our EU dream. You know, this is not a topic on the agenda so far in Albania. It crops up every so often. But is this issue, and are there other issues related to diversity inclusion which are potential obstacles for Albania at the moment?
Look, same-sex unions are not part of the EU acquis. Member states have different practices and different approaches, but I think the fundamental principle is that of non-discrimination. So all citizens are equal before the law. And I think currently, at least in some parts of Albania, there are groups like women, girls, members of certain communities like the LGBTIQ community that do suffer discrimination, that do suffer the Roma, exactly, if you talk about ethnicity. So there is definitely progress that needs to be made in that direction. Respect for minorities is an essential component of the fundamentals chapter as well. So we need to address these issues, and we have actually, for this reason, developed a number of projects that are precisely intending to help local authorities, because I think these changes, you know, have to happen locally most of the time. At the central government, you can put in place the regulatory framework, you can adopt strategies, but then, you know, it has to be implemented on the ground. What is missing, perhaps, is that sometimes strategies are adopted, but then the governance that is needed in order to implement these strategies also at national level is not there, because obviously you can give the Ministry of Health and Social Inclusion, Social Protection, the task to implement that particular strategy, but on their own, they cannot do it. And so they need really a whole of government approach.
And when it comes to the other chapters, ones that we know need most work, consumer and health protection, environment and climate change, transport, fisheries, food safety, agriculture, which do you see as being the biggest challenge out of these? Are you able to sort of identify one where you think this is going to be difficult at all levels?
For me, everything that pertains to the fundamental cluster is actually the biggest challenge. The rest, you know, is the question of adopting legislation, creating perhaps bodies that need to monitor or implement that legislation, you know, introducing standards, and that can be done. You know, you just need to develop the technical capacities, you need funding, of course, but it can be achieved. And now that we have this reform and growth plan that will facilitate Albania's access to at least parts of the single market, there will be a huge incentive to adopt those standards. But when it comes to the fundamentals, you know, when it comes to fighting corruption, fighting organized crime, you really have to achieve a systemic change, actually a societal change. Because sometimes in situations like this, and I don't want to sound preaching, I think, you know, there are European countries that had the same problems and had to address the same systemic challenges. The level of tolerance in the population is too high, in the sense that sometimes they think, well, you know, if I don't pay a little bribe, I'm not going to get this service. So you really have to change that. In order to change that, I think the first step is the one that we achieved in 2016, the independence of the judiciary. And to see that the judiciary now is starting to deliver, is starting to indict and convict people who are guilty of corruption is a very powerful signal to the Albanian people.